All right, guys, so we are still going through our application here. And what we're doing right now is trying to get all of our create, read, update, and delete functions to work properly, make sure that we've tested them thoroughly before we keep going in the application. And we did get create working completely yesterday. We had a couple bugs in there and got some experience figuring out how to fix the bugs. So for example, learning that this insert function actually mutates the list that you're inserting something in rather than returning a new one. And we had to make a copy so that we weren't modifying the fields here. And, other such things as well. Like forgetting to have our move here for the basically the temporary file. And so we weren't retracking the IDs. And so those were just a couple bugs that we fixed the other day. Well, now we're trying to get read here. And as we see over in the console output, when we run these things here, so the fields that we want to be printing, we want to be printing name and cash for customers, and then name, assets, and liabilities for store owners, and just name for stores. And so we do have just name for stores, but for these other ones, it seems like we are not getting the right thing here. So actually, it looks like we have name and cash. So we simply have a none type here for liabilities, it looks like. And so if we look at what we're passing this, well, you know what? Actually, I think we're absolutely fine. Do you see the problem, Audie?
Not yet. Just 1 second.
Well, actually, you know what? I lied. I'm being silly. See, I thought we were actually passing values here, and no, this is just the ID. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so where's our print at? We have a print here, fields for read. Okay, so how about we change our print and let's just do store owners since that seems to be the case that we're failing on here. Okay, so for this one, just so that we get an understanding of what it thinks the information is, you see how we have like a whole bunch of things in each one of these. In this one call, we have like 3 levels deep, right? First, we're going to grab the index from the indices here that we're going over, right? And then after that, we are going to grab the name corresponding to that index in this array, and then we're going to grab the value on the row corresponding to that string that represents the value, and then we're going to turn it into a string. That's what this does here. So let's get all that information up front, right? So if we just call the print function, we don't put anything, it'll print new line. So let's just print a new line, then print the field name here that we're going to be trying to grab. And then after that, let's print the value for the field name too. Or rather, we'll just print the whole thing. And this is because we want to be figuring out what are we actually getting here. Oh, it doesn't like this. We need another parentheses. Okay. So what we're going to be trying to do is print out the values here so that we get an idea of what our code's actually doing, because what we expect it to be doing, obviously, we're not getting the right thing there. So if we run these prints, so we are grabbing the store owners here for Graham Bell. And if we look, we're looking for ID2 in our table. Store owners, we have ID2, 800, 1000. But for whatever reason, it thinks that the assets is 1000, even though in the order of fields that we're passing it, we go in the order of name, assets, liabilities, right? Well, I legitimately do not know. So we'll have some fun debugging here. But I mean, this explains why this is showing up as none, right? Because it really does think it's none and it thinks assets is 1,000. And
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think I see it.
Okay.
So we added these people. So here is what we say the values are up here for store owners. ID, name, username, password, assets, and liabilities. That's the order
Yes.
that we say data is in, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now look at the data we have in the file.
Okay. No username.
And that is bad on us because we were the ones who added these, right?
Yes.
So when we added them, we forgot to supply a username parameter. And you see how our code didn't stop us, right? And so at some point, we will probably want to come back and add some validation, some error messages, so that if we try to add a person that doesn't have enough fields, that will throw an exception. We won't let them do it. Because otherwise you end up with data rows like this, where our program didn't throw an exception, it let us do it, but now we're getting wrong values somewhere else because it let us put in bad data, right?
Yeah.
So from the looks of it, this actually wasn't a problem with our read code here. Our read code's fine. This was just a problem with this data. So now we've added usernames, albeit by hand, which isn't the best, right? But we've added usernames. And so now if we come back, we should be able to get rid of our print statements here. And now, if we print all of our reads here, I believe all of these will work correctly. Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so now we have tested our create function and we've tested our read function. And so next, we will want to test update. And all right, so let's pick a customer and let's write an update call here. So shall we update Charlie, perhaps? And actually, I think we forgot to, very strange. I wonder why the customer's call is working. Because you see how we forgot to put username here as well?
Yeah.
So that one should be fine. But why is our read actually working here? Seems like it should, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's try adding it and then seeing if.
Well,
it's
okay.
because
Yeah.
I get it. It's because we weren't trying to read from the problem rows, right?
Yeah, that's what
We
I
were
was
reading
thinking.
from Alice Carter, and Alice Carter actually has a username, so yeah, but we still did the wrong thing there. So let's go back and fix our creates there, just so that. See, this way, we won't introduce this problem if we ever try to re-add people with the same code that we've called here. Okay, there. And we have our store owner is just fine here. All right, so there, that's that. So now update, right? What we were looking at was we can pick a customer update. How about we update? We can update Alice. Let's say we want to give Alice more money in her account. Okay, so this is going to be looking at the record for Alice, but we're not gonna actually pass her name, because if you remember, the parameter that we pass here is ID. Okay, so this is the record that we want to modify, and we want to set. So we want to call update record, and then we want to update Alice's record, ID 3. Let's say that Alice got married. And so we want to change her name from Alice Carter to Alice, I don't know. So she got married, and now her name's changed. So here we need to be actually passing the table first, so store owners. So look at the order of our parameters here. Oh, yeah.
Spelling of store.
Store. Yeah. Store owners. So table name, ID, field, and the new value. So table is store owners, ID 3, which is Alice. We're going to update the name field with the new value because she got married. So let's look at this for a sec. We're going to go look at the customers table. Alice Carter is what it is right there. Now, if we come in here and now we run our file here, we want to be updating her name to Alice Carpenter. Okay, so we come in and we look, and it doesn't look like it actually did it. Interesting. Oh, it's because that was customers. Yeah, well, wow, you know what? Look, good thing our code didn't error out there, but the problem is that the record that we pulled, this was from the customer
she's
table,
a customer, not a store
and this is store owners. And so I had just done the wrong thing there, which makes sense that her record didn't get updated, right? But fortunately, we went through all the store owners, we didn't find one. Our code didn't error there, which perhaps again, once we come back and add validation, if we go through and the user tries to query our data store with an ID that doesn't exist, we probably want to tell them about it, right? Like not just do nothing, right? We probably want to say, you know, we're sorry, but the ID that you used to query does not exist. Please try again, something like that, right? So that's something that we should come back and add later. But now, with me being a little bit smarter, Alice. Okay, this time that's not the reason. So if this didn't work, it seems like everything else is right here. So we're matching the name of the column. So let's see just the row. This should print Alice's row here, right? Alice's row after we've changed the row field. Let's see what it thinks we have.
Doesn't print anything.
Interesting. Is it because I didn't toString it? Or it doesn't think that we're getting hit here. Oh, I got it again. Look at the odd one out here. I keep doing this too. I should remember.
Oh, what is it?
See how this is a number? And you remember how everything
right.
in our CSV files is a string. So this is like the fourth time I've done that. So this is one reason why I actually really like programming with strongly typed languages, because you have actual data types and the compiler won't even let you run your code if you have a type mismatch. And Python lets you do it all day. but you get weird bugs like this where it doesn't work and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And it's because it doesn't like force you to have data types. So now let's try it. So now if we run our code, we look at it. Oh, no, still not going. Well, we're just not having very good luck here, are we? Well, let's see if it thinks we have a value for row now, at least, right? Okay, now at least we have a value for row, and at least the value for row is changed here, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, you know what? It's because I was looking at customers again. No, but I should have been looking at, wait, hold up.
It was supposed to be customers.
This time it was supposed to be customers, right?
Yes.
So.
Okay, I think I saw the problem just now.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean in the code right there, store owners right there.
And in fact, this is our generic function, right?
Yes.
So shame on us. We made another bug here. This should be easy to fix though, right?
Yes, table name.
We should be concatenating table name with the CSV file. So
and we have the same.
I'd like to tell you that I intentionally put all sorts of bugs in our code so that we would have practice debugging. But you want to know what the honest answer is? I didn't intentionally put these bugs in the code. So, I mean, you've seen, I don't think we spent much more than 10 minutes figuring out any one of them, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, there you go. We've certainly had plenty of things wrong with each one. So, so let's go back through and let's re-add the records to our, so we've got table here. Yeah. Let's re-add the records for our store owners file since we had a bunch of, well, actually, no, we should just be able to, no, these aren't right anymore because those are customer records now. So let's come back and we commented out the lines previously. Let's come back. We want to set this one to 0. Okay, and let's create our store owners here. This time with usernames because we added usernames.
Yes.
Why don't you? I don't know, it doesn't like that, but whatever. So we're going to create our store owners again, and this time we want to try updating. So let's create our store owners. Indentation. Okay, so it really won't let me even run with that. I
think it's the create record part, the beginning of the line.
Oh, is there a space? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Whoops. All right. So we create our new store owners. Okay, now that looks right. All right, those are store owners. Okay, and we've updated this to 2. Okay, so that worked fine. And we comment this out. All right, for real this time, we're gonna try to update Alice Carter's record in the customers table, move it back to the customers table. And now we should update her name, right? Yes. Fingers crossed. Aha.
Yay.
It worked. Okay. Now, if we wanted to update her name, you see now her name doesn't match her username anymore. So maybe we want to let her update her username too, right? So now we've already run that one. So let's try another one. So let's say we want to let her update her username. And we want the new value of the username be alice.carpenter, right? To match the fact that her name changed here. So still going to be customers table, still going to be the ID of 3 for Alice. And we run this. We've now updated her username. So it looks to me, now let's try one more. Let's say that when she got married, she got money. She married a rich guy. So let's say now she has a lot of spending money. So this time we want to update cash value. And so she is going to go from, let's see, what's she at right now? $500 in her spending account. Well, let's say that 1,500. So I'm going to have a lot more cash on hand to spend in our store application here. Okay, everything seems to be looking fine, right?
All right. Yeah.
Now, if we want to try something here, we should, the thing that I'm about to write should not work. It shouldn't do anything. If we try to update the ID here, see how in our code we're purposefully ignoring ID because we don't want to let them update ID because that's something that we track. So if we say that we want to update the ID and we want to make the ID, let's make it something, let's make it like 27, okay? So right now we're going to say, I want to go to the row here with ID 3 and I want to update ID to 27. In our code, what we're doing is we're checking, we will only trigger something if we find the row's ID and the field that we're trying to update isn't ID, right? So this should not work. This should stay with ID 3, right? Because we just skipped that row too. Does it make sense? We don't want to let them update ID.
So we also have to throw an exception there.
Yep, you're correct. And eventually, when we come back and add exceptions, we probably should, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's delete, or sorry, that's update. And one more to test here, right? Now let's test delete. So we can do this with customers again. It really shouldn't matter here. So right here, well, looks like we don't actually need these things. So it's obviously because I copy pasted the function, right? But you see how we're never using these variables? We don't actually need them. Let's see if we can get a function right the first time here. I don't think any of the other functions have worked the first time, but see, we caught this bug when we fixed the other one. So let's delete Charlie here. So it's ID 2 from the customers table. So remember, we're not doing anything on delete. We're not doing anything to change the ID tracking that we're doing. So if we delete Charlie, it should go straight from 1 to 3. So 1, 3, 4, 5 should be the records we have. Because we're not going to like reset the ID counter or anything like that. So it should go to 1, 3, 4, 5. Charlie's 2. Okay, so if we delete Charlie, come back, looks like that actually worked. So hooray, we did get one right, quote unquote, the first time. So hopefully that's convinced you now that the code that we have will let us create, read, update, and delete all of our data tables here, right?
Yeah.
So when we started this, I have no idea what your expectations were, and you see we have some comments in here, but it's not that small. It's also not that huge, right? All things considered, you know, maybe 40, 50 lines to let us update and delete and create different things. So I'll kind of leave it up to you now what you want to do first. So as some of our observations that have come up when we were testing this, we will probably want to come back and add some validation and exception handling here. That is something that we can do now if you want, or we could go try to make more progress on the main program loop. And just
like, I'd like us to go to the main program loop. Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe at some point I'll come up with a list of things we should handle. I'll try to have you do it. You know, because I know a lot of this has been me typing, and ultimately that's not the best because eventually you're going to need to be typing without me.
Yes.
But I don't know if we're quite at the point where, I mean, you tell me, because
I mean, I don't mind watching and just being able to understand what you're doing now.
Mhm.
So yeah, it works for me for now.
Yeah. I mean, of course, at some point we want to get your speed up too. That's the real goal
Yeah.
here. Because
Yes.
I mean, there's getting stuck, like where you really need someone to help unstick you. That's not so great, right? We kind of want to get past that point, but past a certain degree, it really is a level of comfort thing. Like in more experienced programmers, it's not that they'll be able to write better code or something. They'll just be able to do it a lot faster. They'll be able to figure out their bugs faster, figure out what to do faster. This is just experience in general. But
Okay.
really, we want to get you there, right? So
Yeah.
all this stuff that I'm going here, I mean, like, this isn't so trivial that like I don't have to think a little bit, but this isn't that bad for me, right? But
Yes.
eventually we want to be getting you to the point where you can do all this without me helping you, because that is the point where you're really more ready to kind of start a career in programming. And I mean, here's the thing though. I don't know how much we've talked about this, but people coming into jobs, I mean, I've been working where I have long enough now that we've had a few new guys, maybe 4 or 5. So I've gotten to see kind of where people are when they come in and how fast they pick up all of the things that our team does. And some people come in stronger than others. I mean, it's just how it works. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to think about where they are relative to kind of what we've been doing. It's kind of hard because
Okay.
things we do are not quite apples to apples, but I would say that most of my coworkers, when they first got hired, they were reasonably quick on their feet programming wise. Like you could tell them to write certain functions to do things, and they were very unfamiliar with the frameworks that my team uses. So we use C# on the back end with a web framework called ASP.NET. And then we use something called Angular on the front end, which is a JavaScript library, or rather framework. And so they were unfamiliar with our tools, but they were familiar with programming and exception handling and object-oriented programming, which we'll get to eventually. And, so there's a fair amount of stuff that they could pick up. And I mean, we might have to explain a thing to them here or there, and they'd be rusty and they'd have to go Google stuff. But give them an hour or so and they would be able to write what we told them to write. And that is where we're trying to get you to the point where no matter what kind of job you end up getting, you'll be solid enough on programming basics, the fundamentals, that you'll be able to adapt yourself to the situation. And you probably already knew all this. The reason why I'm actually making a point of pointing all this out is because some people get the mistaken impression that they should specialize, that I'm going to learn Django, the Python web framework, and then I'm going to be really good at Django, and that's the only thing I'm going to do. The problem is that the number of jobs in Django specifically, where all you do is Django, is going to be way lower than the total number of jobs, or even just the total number of Python jobs, right? You don't necessarily want to box yourself like that. Because you might think that it's helpful that you're going to have really good, deep domain-specific knowledge in this one area. But let me tell you, I think I've said this before too, it's way more efficient to actually learn on the job than it is to try to learn for the job before the job. And what I mean by that is when you're in a production environment where your team deploys web apps in, like, let's say you do Java. So Java web app, you use something like Spring as your web framework, and you use something like Hibernate to manage your database. If those things don't mean to anything to you, that's fine. But you're using a certain set of platforms and infrastructure to manage your application. If you go try to learn Spring and Hibernate on your own, these Java web application, some libraries that help you write Java web application. Well, if you go try to learn them on your own, you can watch tutorials and there's plenty of good stuff on the internet, but you'll get stuck from time to time. It is way, way, way faster for you to just basically know how web apps work, and then to go onto your team and then try to understand your team's code base. And then if you get stuck, to ask your more experienced senior developers on your team to help unstick you. So, hey, when we're doing this thing here in our application, why are we doing this thing, right? You can ask them specific questions. You're learning only the things that you really need to know on your team specifically. so you're not wasting any time learning things that the internet says important that your team doesn't actually use for whatever reason, right? Because that happens all the time, right? Different code bases are different teams work in different ways. So I don't want to overly belabor this point, but mostly where I'm going with this is what we're shooting for here is not to get you really like knowledge boxed. We don't want you to just learn, for example, how to make web applications in Python. But ideally, we'd like you to, of course, understand programming in general, the ideas behind writing the code, so that no matter what kind of job you get hired in, you'll be able to pivot into like becoming useful faster. And that's the other thing. No matter how far we get here, I mean, like I said, depends on the person a little bit. It usually takes on the order of 1 to 2 months for our new guys to be very useful. No offense to them. I was there too, man. I've only been hired. Of course, I moved up rather fast because of the need on our team. So I am kind of in more of a leadership. I actually don't code as much as I used to. I think I mentioned that too. I have much more of an organizational role now, but I mean, it took me, and I did quite well in college. It took me more than a month before I could really contribute that much to the team. And that's just because when you first get hired, you really don't know what your team's doing. And like, they're not going to want you to just go like write stuff willy-nilly, like basically trying to have it work, because when you're actually deploying code to a customer, you don't want to have the new guy break things. So they're going to watch you more closely for the first little bit, but there is a lot of learning that happens on the job too. And that's normal. At least it's normal for the enterprise application development jobs that I have experience in. If you're trying to freelance, the problem with freelancing is that you don't have anyone who you can ask questions to, at least not really, right? I don't want to get super off topic. I would not recommend freelancing as your first gig, because you probably don't have enough experience to do it properly. I mean, maybe there's some brilliant people who can do it, but
not me.
Right. You want someone who you can ask questions to. Now you want to be a good developer so that you don't have to ask them questions that you should know the answer to, right? So that will tend to annoy people, or most especially questions that if you ask them the question and they type the question into Google and then they click on the first thing and the first thing answers your question, they're gonna be like, why'd you get me? Like, I don't need to be involved here. That's why I've been trying to drill into you so much the fact that you should get an error message. Very first thing you do is you plug it into Google, you read what other people say. If it seems like it's the same situation, you try what they tried. And if that fixes your problem, great. Then you don't have to go bother anyone else, right? And hopefully you learn something. So that the next time you see it, you won't even have to Google it. You'll just be like, oh, that's the problem, right? And this is why senior devs end up being so much faster, is because they've seen it all before and they can just instantly know what the problem is in a way that like a lot of newer developers just can't. So like when you're in college, sometimes you get stuck on a bug for like hours and it work with the amount of, I don't want to overstate the differences here, but to me, college versus work, like when I was learning conceptually versus when I was actually doing, that's why I've tried to have us like actually do stuff, is the amount of code that I write in a week at work is like about as much code as I wrote for like 2 or 3 projects in college, like over the span of weeks or months. And I'm not saying that some of the code we wrote in college was harder, like it had more difficult concepts that we had to learn and whatever, but because some of the code that we do day to day is kind of boilerplate, we're kind of doing similar sorts of things in different places and you have something to copy kind of, but like the magnitude of the amount of code you write and how you write code and how good you are at figuring out what's wrong when things go wrong, there's no substitute for actually having the work experience. So why did I bring all this up? Because we're trying to get you to the point where you will be ready to plug yourself into something like that, so that if you do get hired by some sort of software engineering firm, you'll be able to get on a team and you won't have to be learning about for loops and while loops and how you call functions and the stuff that you should already know, but you'll be able to be learning about their application framework specifically, the way that their team specifically does things like that. So you'll already be more or less there. You'll just have to pick up some details. and everyone has to pick up the details, right? But
Yeah.
that's what we're shooting for. So at some point, I will try to turn this back on you. I mean, I know we were kind of going to be going through this example to try to see where you were programming wise, and I don't think I chose real well. I think I should have been more realistic in this and tried to go with something a little bit smaller. Like if I actually wanted you to be doing all the typing here, I'm not sure that would have been real fair. You know, I have a pretty hard time figuring out what's easy and what's not now, because I mean, what's the best way to say this? It sounds super arrogant if I say everything's easy for me now, but you know, like once you've had enough experience, anything up until a certain point, you're going to know how to do it. Like everyone, not just me, any of my coworkers can do the same thing, right? It just means that I'm like very bad at thinking like a very new developer because I haven't been one for like 5 or 6 years now. So
Yeah.
what I think is easy may not be easy to new people. So I think this whole exercise we're going through is kind of like that, where I mean, like we've been making it up as we go, and it's not like awful. It's not like impossible.
Yes, it isn't. It isn't. The way I see it is, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to do all of this, but I actually understand it, and for me, that's kind of progress. So I know, I could come close to doing this if we had something like, yeah. So.
And the good news is, hopefully, having gone through some of this, I mean, it'll be kind of trial and error. I've actually really never taught another person so much as like me how to code. Like I've helped people a lot in college. I was never a TA because I never had the time for it, but I slid into that. Actually, I had to be really careful because in college you have academic honesty stuff, and I really can't help people write their code. If it's their homework, they have to do it, not me. And that was very important to me to be, you know, to keep integrity, to not share code with other people. So I had to figure out a way how to kind of help explain concepts to people without telling them how to do their projects. And it's so much easier at work where I don't have to tiptoe around this. And I can just say, yeah, do that. Saves a lot of time. But at any rate, I have never actually helped someone go from very little experience in programming to actually being more experienced. And I think I've mentioned this before earlier on in our series, but we're going pretty fast, you know, relative to the college classes I had, where we spent just weeks and weeks and weeks on really basic stuff, which to me, I was super bored in the class. I was like, can we please move on? Like I got this like day 2, and now it's like 3 weeks in. So they spent a lot of time on this. Now, some people didn't. That's the problem. And that's the other tricky thing about classroom environment is some people learn faster than others. Usually it's not because they're just, so much smarter, but they've just had that better background preparation in their life, right? You know, like they were able to focus on school more, maybe because their home life wasn't so tough. You get the idea, right? Some people just come from a little bit more of a position of privilege so that they just can move faster. It's like brute fact of life. And unfortunately, some of the times the classes don't really keep up with that. But anyway. So to get back to all this, I'll keep typing for the moment. Although, like you said, obviously you need to be understanding this. If something doesn't make sense, don't let me just move on.
Okay.
So, Audie, can we perhaps pause for a little? I realized that I had a phone call with someone this morning, and
Okay.
so I know this hasn't quite been an hour, but
Okay.
I mean, we did make some progress today. Can I text you? Let's do that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so that's where we'll cut for today. I'll pick back up perhaps in a second here.
All right.